winter wind howled outside, but inside the stone cottage, everything was warm. Elias Varn sat in his old wooden chair near the fireplace, a cup of tea growing cold in his hands. He was 78 years old, with white hair that stuck up in all directions and deep lines around his eyes from decades of smiling. The children of Ember's Rest called him Grandpa, even the ones who were not related to him. Everyone knew his cottage. Everyone knew his stories. And everyone knew about his little dragon. Pyr lay curled around the base of the fireplace like a living ember. She was about the size of a large cat, covered in scales that shifted between copper and orange depending on the light. Her eyes were golden, and when she breathed, small wisps of heat rose from her nostrils. She did not need wood to keep the fire burning. Her body gave off enough warmth to heat the entire cottage through the coldest nights. 3 children sat on the floor near Elias, their eyes wide as he finished his story about the great ships that first left Earth hundreds of years ago. The youngest, a girl named Tessa, reached out to touch Pyrrha's tail. The little dragon opened one eye, made a soft chirping sound, and went back to sleep. "Grandpa," said Marcus, the oldest of the 3, "where did you find Pyra?" Elias smiled the way he always did when someone asked this question. "A long time ago, on a world very far from here. She was very small then. Small enough to fit in my pocket. Was she always a dragon?" Tessa asked. "She's not really a dragon," Elias said gently. "That is just what we call her. I do not know what she really is. But I know she chose me, and I chose her, and we have been together ever since." This was the story he always told. It was simple, and it was true, as far as it went. What he did not tell the children was that the world where he found Pyra was supposed to be dead. What he did not tell them was that he had broken 17 different laws to land there. What he did not tell them was that when he found the tiny egg in the ruins of a burned temple, something inside him knew that if anyone else found it first, they would destroy it. So he had kept her. For 43 years, he had kept her. The children left when the sun began to set, running home through the snow to their families. Elias watched them go from his window, then turned back to Pyra. She had uncurled herself and was watching him with those ancient golden eyes. "You feel it too," he said quietly. "Something is coming?" Pyra made a low sound, almost like a question. "I do not know what," Elias admitted. "But we will be careful, as we always are." Ember's Rest was a small colony on the edge of known space. About 3,000 people lived in the valley, farming the rich volcanic soil and trading with the occasional ship that passed through. They had chosen this life on purpose. The galaxy was full of great empires and terrible wars, of technology that could reshape planets and weapons that could destroy them. The people of Ember's Rest wanted none of it. They wanted peace. They wanted quiet. They wanted to raise their children far from the madness of the core worlds. Elias had come here for the same reasons, but also for another one. Here, at the edge of everything, no one asked too many questions. Here, a little dragon could curl by the fire, and people would simply smile and accept it as one of life's small mysteries. The next day brought a ship to the colony's small spaceport. This was not unusual. Ships came every few weeks, bringing supplies and news from other worlds. But the woman who stepped off this ship was different. Elias could see it in the way she moved, in the way her eyes scanned everything around her as if looking for threats. Her name was Sarah Okonkwo. She was 32 years old, with dark skin and short hair, and a kind of tired look that came from running for a long time. She told Governor Tanaka that she was a writer looking for a quiet place to work. The governor, a practical woman in her 50s, did not believe her entirely, but she also did not turn her away. Ember's Rest had always welcomed those who needed a place to hide. Sarah found a small room in the colony's only inn. She spent her first few days walking the valley, learning the paths between farms, watching the people go about their lives. On the third day, she came to Ilias's cottage. He was outside, clearing snow from his path when she arrived. Pyrrha was with him, sitting on a stone wall and watching the world with lazy interest. Sira stopped. She stared at Pyrrha for a long moment, and Elias saw something change in her face. It was not fear, exactly. It was recognition. "That is a beautiful creature," Sira said carefully. "What is she?" "Just a friend I found long ago," Elias replied, watching her just as carefully. "The children call her my little dragon. Does she have a name?" "Pyrrha." Sira nodded slowly. She did not ask any more questions that day. She simply introduced herself, accepted Ilias's offer of tea, and sat in his cottage for an hour, talking about nothing important. But Ilias noticed that her eyes kept returning to Pyrrha, and in those eyes, he saw the look of someone who knew a secret. That night, after Sira had gone, Elias sat by the fire with Pyrrha in his lap. Her warmth seeped into his old bones, chasing away the ache of age. He stroked her scales gently, feeling the faint pulse of energy that lived just beneath them. "She knows what you are," he said softly. "Or she suspects." Pyrrha looked up at him and made a small sound. "I know. We have been careful for so long. But the galaxy has a way of finding things that want to stay hidden." He sighed and leaned back in his chair. "Whatever comes, I will protect you. That is the promise I made 43 years ago, and I will keep it until my last breath." Outside, the winter wind continued to blow, and the stars turned slowly overhead. Somewhere out there, among those countless points of light, something was indeed coming. The Empire had long memories, and some secrets could not stay buried forever. But for now, the fire was warm, the cottage was safe, and the little dragon slept peacefully in an old man's arms. Sira came back to the cottage every day for the next 2 weeks. She listened to Ilias's stories about Earth, about the first colonies, about the strange things he had seen during his years as a xenobiologist. She helped him clear snow and repair his fence. She became a familiar face in the colony, and people stopped watching her with suspicion. But Elias knew she was waiting. She had something to say, and she was building up the courage to say it. It happened on a cold evening in the middle of the month. They were sitting by the fire, drinking tea, while Pyrrha dozed on her usual spot near the hearth. Sira had been quiet for a long time, staring into the flames when she finally spoke. "I know what she is," Sira said. "Pyrrha, I know what she really is." Elias did not react. He simply took another sip of his tea and waited. "She is a Virketh," Sira continued. "The last one, as far as anyone knows. They were supposed to be extinct. The Dominion hunted them all down over 200 years ago. That is what the history books say." Elias agreed calmly. Sira turned to look at him. "You are not surprised that I know. I have been waiting for someone to figure it out for 43 years. I am only surprised it took this long." He set down his cup and met her eyes. "How did you find out?" Sira reached into her bag and pulled out a small data tablet. She activated it, and a holographic image appeared above it. It showed a creature that looked very much like Pyrrha, but much larger, with wings spread wide and flames dancing along its scales. "I was a journalist in the core worlds," she said. "I investigated the things that powerful people wanted to stay hidden. 3 years ago, I found references to the Virketh in sealed Dominion archives. Not the official story, the real one. And what is the real story?" Sira took a deep breath. "The official story says the Virketh were dangerous. Beasts, uncontrollable, destructive. Dominion claims they had no choice but to destroy them for the safety of the galaxy. But that is not true. No, the Virketh were not mindless creatures. They were intelligent. They formed bonds with other beings. deep bonds. Once bonded, a Vyrakith and their partner became something more than either was alone. They shared thoughts. They shared strength. And together, they could do things that should have been impossible. Elias looked down at Pyra, who had opened her eyes and was watching them both. Yes, I know. The Dominion did not kill them because they were dangerous, Syrah said. They killed them because they could not be controlled. The Vyrakith only ever bonded with humans for reasons no one understood. And those bonded pairs could not be conquered. They could not be enslaved. They could not be made to serve the Empire. So the Empire decided to remove them entirely. Every last one. They burned entire worlds to make sure none survived. They erased the Vyrakith from history and replaced the truth with lies. Syrah's voice shook with anger. And now I find out that one survived. Here, at the edge of nowhere, kept safe by an old man in a stone cottage. Elias reached down and stroked Pyra's scales. She pressed against his hand, making that soft chirping sound. I found her egg on a quarantined world, he said quietly. The Dominion had already burned everything. There was nothing left but ruins and ash. But deep in an old temple, I found a hidden chamber that the fire had not reached. And inside, there was one egg. How did you know what it was? I did not, at first. But when she hatched, when she looked at me with those golden eyes, something happened between us. A connection. I cannot explain it. I just knew that she was mine to protect, and I was hers to keep. I smuggled her off that world in my coat pocket. She was so small then, the size of my finger. Syrah stared at him. You have kept her hidden for over 40 years. I have kept her safe. There's a difference. Elias's voice was gentle but firm. Pyra could be so much more than she is. She could grow. She could become what her ancestors were. But that would mean revealing herself. That would mean war. So she stays small. She stays quiet. She keeps the fire warm and lets the children pet her tail, and the galaxy forgets that the Vyrakith ever existed. That is not fair, Syrah said. She should not have to hide what she is. No, but the alternative is worse. Elias looked at her directly. Why are you here, Syrah? Why did you come to Ember's Rest? She was quiet for a moment. I was too good at my job. I found secrets that powerful people wanted to stay buried. They tried to silence me. I ran. I kept running until I reached the edge of the map, and then I ran a little further, and you brought those secrets with you. Some of them, including everything I found about the Vyrakith. She paused. Elias, I did not come here looking for Pyra. I did not even know she existed. But now that I have found her, I think you should know that you may not be as hidden as you believe. The Dominion has long memories. They never stop looking. As if to prove her point, a soft chime came from the communication panel on Elias's wall. He rose slowly and walked over to check it. His face grew serious as he read the message. A Dominion patrol ship has entered the system, he said. They claim it is a routine census survey. Syrah's face went pale. There is no such thing as a routine survey this far out. Elias returned to his chair and looked at Pyra. The little dragon was fully awake now, her scales flickering with faint light. She could feel his worry. She could feel the danger approaching. Then we must be very careful, Elias said. And we must hope that after all these years, the galaxy has truly forgotten. But deep in his heart, he knew that hope was not enough. The wolves had finally found their way to the door. The Dominion ship landed 3 days later. It was a patrol cruiser, painted in the cold gray colors of the Empire, with weapon turrets visible along its hull. The people of Ember's Rest gathered at the edge of the spaceport to watch as the landing ramp lowered and soldiers marched out in perfect formation. At their head walked a man in a black uniform with silver markings on his collar. His face was thin and sharp, like a blade. His eyes moved across the crowd with the patience of a predator who knew his prey had nowhere to run. His name was Arbiter Commander Voss Kale. He had served the Dominion for 30 years. He had crushed rebellions, silenced dissidents, and erased problems that the Empire wanted forgotten. He was very good at his job. Behind him walked a younger officer, a human woman with short dark hair and a troubled expression. Her name was Lieutenant Mira Chun. She had been assigned to this posting as punishment for questioning orders. And she knew that Kale was watching her for any sign of further disobedience. Governor Tanaka met them at the edge of the spaceport. She bowed politely, as protocol demanded, but her eyes were hard. Arbiter, Commander, welcome to Ember's Rest. How may we assist you? This is a routine census survey, Kale said. His voice was soft, almost pleasant. We are updating colonial records across this sector. My soldiers will need access to your population database, your property records, and permission to conduct interviews. Of course, we have nothing to hide. Everyone says that. Kale smiled, but there was no warmth in it. We will begin tomorrow. The soldiers spread through the colony like a disease. They went from house to house, scanning everything, asking questions, taking notes. They were polite, technically. They did not damage property or threaten violence. But everyone could feel the weight of their presence, the unspoken message behind their eyes. We own you. We can do whatever we want. Elias kept Pyra hidden in a chamber beneath his cottage. Long ago, when he first built this home, he had discovered a natural hot spring deep in the rock. The thermal energy it gave off was strong enough to mask any other heat signature. He had expanded the chamber over the years, creating a safe place where Pyra could hide if danger ever came. Now that danger was here. Stay quiet, he told her as he sealed the hidden entrance. Stay calm. I will come back for you as soon as it is safe. Pyra pressed her head against his hand. Through their bond, he could feel her fear, but also her trust. She believed in him. She always had. The soldiers came to his cottage on the 4th day. Kale himself led the inspection. He walked through Elias's home slowly, touching books, examining photographs, pausing to look at the fireplace where Pyra usually slept. You live alone? He asked. I am a widower. My wife died 12 years ago. And yet people say you have a pet. A strange creature. They call it your little dragon. Elias kept his face calm. I found her many years ago on a distant world. She is just an unusual animal. She likes the warmth of the fire. Where is she now? She wanders. She comes and goes as she pleases. I expect she is hunting in the hills somewhere. Kale studied him for a long moment. Elias could see the intelligence in those cold eyes, the calculation. This was not a man who believed in coincidence. I will want to see this creature when she returns, Kale said finally. For the census records, of course. Of course. After they left, Elias sat down heavily in his chair. His hands were shaking. He had faced many dangers in his long life, but none quite like this. Kale was not looking for colonists to count. He was looking for something specific. And Elias was terribly afraid that he knew exactly what it was. The colony began to resist in small ways. Paperwork got lost. Computer systems developed strange glitches. Soldiers asking for directions found themselves walking in circles. No one did anything obvious enough to justify punishment, but the delays added up. Governor Tanaka organized everything quietly. She had lived long enough to know that empires could be fought if you were patient and clever. You did not need weapons. You needed unity. You needed stubbornness. You needed the willingness to stand together even when you were afraid. Lieutenant Chun found Sira on the 5th night. The journalist was walking alone near the edge of the colony, watching the stars. You should be careful, Chun said quietly. Kale is suspicious of outsiders. Syrah turned to look at her. Are you here to warn me or threaten me? I am here because I am tired of pretending that what we do is right. Chun's voice was bitter. I joined the Dominion Navy because I believed the Empire kept people safe. I did not know I would spend my career terrorizing farmers and hunting old men. Then help us. I cannot. Not directly. But I can tell you this. Whatever you are hiding, hide it better. Kale has ordered deep scans of the entire valley. He's looking for anomalous energy signatures. He knows something is here. Syrah felt cold fear wash through her. When do the scans start? Tomorrow morning. She ran. She ran through the dark streets to Elias's cottage and pounded on his door. When he opened it, she pushed past him into the room. They are going to scan the valley, she said. Deep scans. They will find the thermal chamber. Elias was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. Then we need to move her. Move her where? The whole valley will be scanned. Not the whole valley. Elias walked to his window and looked out at the dark shapes of the mountains in the distance. There are volcanic tunnels in those mountains. Natural vents that run for miles, filled with heat and steam. If we can get Pyra into those tunnels, her signature will be lost among 1,000 other heat sources. How do we get her there without being seen? Elias smiled for the first time in days. I have been telling stories to the children of this colony for 20 years. Those children are adults now, and they have not forgotten their grandpa. Within an hour, the message had spread. Quietly, secretly, the people of Ember's Rest began to prepare. They would protect the little dragon that kept the fire warm. They would show the Empire what humans did when someone threatened their family. They moved Pyra that night, while the Dominion soldiers slept in their camp near the spaceport. Marcus, the boy who used to sit on Elias's floor listening to stories, was now a grown man who knew every path through the mountains. He carried Pyra in a thermal-shielded bag, moving quickly and quietly through the darkness. Other colonists waited along the route. When Marcus grew tired, someone else took the bag. When Dominion drones passed overhead, they hid in caves and crevices until the danger passed. It was like a relay race across 20 miles of frozen wilderness, and every person who participated knew that they were risking their lives. But they did it anyway. Because Grandpa Elias had been there when their children were born. Because Pyra had warmed their homes during cold winters. Because the Empire had no right to take something that belonged to them. By morning, Pyra was deep in the volcanic tunnels, hidden among the steam vents and hot springs that filled the mountain's heart. She was safe, for now. But Elias was not. The soldiers came at dawn. Kale himself led them, his face set in cold determination. They surrounded the cottage and called for Elias to come out. He emerged slowly, holding his cup of tea. He looked at the soldiers, at their weapons, at the Arbiter commander who stood at their head, and he smiled gently. Good morning. Would anyone like some tea? We have detected anomalous readings beneath your property, Kale said. You will allow us to search? Of course. I have nothing to hide. The soldiers broke through the hidden entrance to the thermal chamber within minutes. They searched every corner, scanned every surface, but found nothing. The chamber was empty. Kale's face did not change, but Elias could see the fury building behind those cold eyes. Where is it? Kale asked. Where's what? Do not play games with me, old man. I know what you are hiding. I know what you have kept secret for 40 years. The last Virketh. The last link to a species we erased from existence. Elias said nothing. Kale stepped closer until they were face to face. You think you are protecting it. You think you are being noble. But you do not understand what that creature really is. You do not understand what it could become. I understand perfectly, Elias said quietly. That is why I protect her. Kale grabbed him by the collar and pulled him close. "Tell me where it is, or I will burn this entire colony to the ground." "You could do that," Elias agreed. "But then you would never find her. And your masters would not be pleased." For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Kale released him and stepped back. "Take him to the ship," he ordered. "We will continue this conversation in a more private setting." The soldiers dragged Elias away. He did not resist. He was an old man, and there was nothing he could do against so many armed enemies. But as they pulled him through the streets, he saw the faces of the colonists watching. He saw their anger, their determination, their refusal to break. Governor Tanaka stood on her porch, arms crossed, eyes burning. "We do not know anything about extinct species or imperial assets," she called out. "Perhaps your intelligence was wrong, Arbiter." Kale ignored her. But Elias knew the message had been sent. The colony would not betray him. The colony would not break. On the Dominion ship, Kale tried everything. He threatened. He promised. He showed Elias images of the destruction the Empire could bring down upon Ember's rest. But Elias did not waver. He simply sat in his cell and told stories. He told stories about Earth, about the blue oceans and green forests that humanity had left behind so long ago. He told stories about the first ships that crossed the void between stars, about the courage it took to leave everything familiar behind. He told stories about fire and how humans had always gathered around it, keeping each other warm through the darkest nights. "You do not understand us," Elias said one evening, when Kale came to interrogate him again. "You think we are weak because we do not have empires. You think we are primitive because we choose simple lives. But that is not weakness. That is strength. Your strength means nothing against orbital weapons," Kale replied. "Perhaps. But you cannot kill an idea with weapons. You cannot destroy love with fire. You can burn our homes and scatter our ashes, but someone will always remember. Someone will always keep the flame alive." Kale stared at him with something that might have been frustration or might have been respect. "Why do you protect that creature so fiercely? It is not even human." "She is my family," Elias said simply. "She chose me, and I chose her. For 43 years, we have kept each other company. She has never asked anything from me except warmth and kindness. And I have never asked anything from her except the same." He paused. "Can you say that about anyone in your empire?" Kale did not answer. He turned and left the cell, and Elias was alone again, but he was not really alone. Even across 20 miles of frozen wilderness, even through layers of rock and steam, he could feel Pyra. Their bond stretched between them like a thread of golden light. She was afraid. She was angry. She missed him terribly, and she was changing, without Elias to keep her calm, without his gentle presence to anchor her. Pyra was becoming what she had always been meant to be. Deep in the volcanic heart of the mountain, she was growing. Her body stretched and expanded. Her scales brightened from copper to gold to blazing white. Her wings, folded tight against her body for 40 years, began to unfurl. The Virkith had been hunted to extinction because they could not be controlled. But they had also been hunted because when someone threatened the ones they loved, they became something that empires learned to fear. Someone had taken her Elias, and the fire was waking up. 3 days passed. The Dominion ship hung in orbit above Ember's rest like a dark moon, blocking out the stars. Kale's patience was running out. He stood on the bridge of his cruiser, watching the peaceful colony below. 3,000 humans living their quiet lives, pretending they knew nothing about the creature he was hunting. He was tired of their stubbornness. He was tired of their silent resistance. It was time to remind them who held the power. "Prepare orbital targeting," he ordered. "Lock onto the main settlement." Lieutenant Chun looked up from her station, her face pale. "Sir, there are civilians down there. families, children. I am aware. Kale's voice was cold. They will surrender the asset, or they will burn. It is their choice. The targeting systems hummed to life. Red crosshairs appeared on the tactical display, centered directly on the heart of the colony. The people below had no weapons that could stop what was coming. They had no shields, no defenses, no way to fight back against the might of the Dominion. But something else did dot deep in the mountains. Pyra felt Elias's fear spike through their bond. He was on that ship. He knew what was about to happen. And for the first time in 43 years, he was not telling her to stay calm. He was telling her to run. But Pyra did not run. She had spent her whole life being small, being quiet, being safe. She had curled by the fire while children petted her scales. She had hidden in thermal chambers while soldiers searched. She had made herself into something harmless because Elias asked her to, because he wanted to protect her from a galaxy that had murdered her entire species. Now the galaxy was threatening to murder everything she loved. The mountain began to shake Dot on the Dominion ship. Alarms screamed to life. Sensors went wild, displaying readings that should have been impossible. Something was rising from the volcanic peaks below, something that registered as a thermal signature larger than the entire colony. What is that? Someone shouted. Kale stared at the display, and for the first time in 30 years, he felt fear. Pyra erupted from the mountain like a second sun. She was no longer housecat-sized. She was vast, ancient, terrible, her wingspan stretching wide enough to cast shadows across the entire valley. Her scales blazed white gold, and flames danced along her body, trailing behind her like the tail of a comet. Her eyes, still golden, still the same eyes that had looked at Elias with love for over 4 decades, were now filled with the fury of a species that had been hunted to extinction. She rose higher, passing through the clouds, ascending toward the ship that hung in orbit above her home. The crew of the cruiser watched in stunned silence as she approached. She was beautiful and terrible, a creature from legends that the Empire had tried to erase. Some of the soldiers fell to their knees. Others wept. Lieutenant Chun stood frozen at her station, watching something that should not exist. "Open fire!" Kale screamed. "Destroy it." The weapon systems would not respond. They flickered and died, overwhelmed by the energy that poured off Pyra's body. The ship's engine sputtered. Lights failed. The entire cruiser went dark, except for the glow coming through the viewports. The blazing light of the last VY, our single quotes KE to Dot. She did not attack. She simply positioned herself between the ship and the colony below, burning with patient, terrible heat. Her message was clear. A warning. A promise. Dot touched them, and I will end you. Dot in his cell. Elias felt her through their bond. 43 years of quiet warmth had become something cosmic, something that stretched across the void between them like a bridge of fire. He closed his eyes and smiled. That is my girl, he thought. That is my beautiful, wonderful girl. On the bridge, Kale faced a choice. He could order his crew to fight, to throw everything they had against this impossible creature. But he could see the fear in their eyes. He could feel the ship dying around him. And he could see, with terrible clarity, that if he chose wrong, he would not survive to report his failure. "Stand down," he said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "All weapons stand down." Lieutenant Chun moved quickly. She had locked herself in the communications room the moment Pyra appeared. Now she was broadcasting everything, every sensor reading, every image, every second of footage showing what the Dominion had tried to destroy 2 centuries ago and what had survived despite them. "This is Lieutenant Mira Chun of the Dominion Navy," she said into the open channel. "What you are seeing is real. The Vyraketh were not monsters. They were partners. They were protectors. and they bonded only with humans. The Empire lied. The Empire murdered an entire species because they could not be conquered. Let the galaxy see the truth. The signal spread outward at the speed of light, bouncing from relay to relay, reaching worlds across the sector, across the galaxy. The secret that the Dominion had buried for 200 years was secret no longer. Kale retreated. He had no choice. His ship was crippled, his crew was broken, and every second he stayed risked complete destruction. He fled into the darkness between stars, leaving Ember's rest behind, and Pyra descended. She landed in the valley as gently as a falling leaf, the flames around her body cooling, her size shrinking. By the time she touched the ground, she was small again, house-cat-sized, copper-scaled, the same little dragon who had curled by the fire and let children touch her tail. The colonists gathered around her in wonder and joy. They had seen what she could become, and they were not afraid. They were proud. Elias came home 3 days later, released from the crippled ship before it limped away. He was tired and thin, but when he saw Pyra waiting on his porch, his face lit up with a smile that seemed to take years off his age. She leaped into his arms, and he held her close, feeling her warmth seep into his old bones. Through their bond, he felt her love, her relief, her fierce protectiveness. "You saved them," he said softly. "You saved everyone." She chirped and pressed her head against his cheek. A week later, Sarah sat with them by the fire, working on her story. The galaxy had seen Chun's broadcast. Other humans were asking questions. Other bonds, long hidden in the shadows of forgotten worlds, were stirring. "Are you afraid of what comes next?" Syrah asked. "The attention, the danger, the change?" Ilias stroked Pyra's warm scales and looked out the window at the mountains, at the stars beyond. "The Empire came knocking," he said, "and my little dragon kept the fire cozy. I think we will manage whatever comes." Pyra purred, and the hearth glowed warm, and outside, the winter wind sang songs of freedom and fire and the love that empires could never destroy.